Hello, welcome to tonight's Multilingual Parenting Live Facebook Q&A. My name is Rita Rosenbach. I am the author of Bringing Up a Bilingual Child. I'm also the founder of the Multilingual Parenting.com website, as well as of this Facebook group that you're currently in. Today I will answer 5 questions that have been sent in advance, and if there are any questions in the comments, I'll also address those. So I'll answer a question from Beatrice, Sehi, Anna, and Federica. And the first one I have is from Beatrice. And she's got 2 and 4-year-old boys. And she did speak Spanish to her eldest son for the 2 first years, but then she went to work and her husband took over and stayed home with the eldest son, which meant that like she writes, Spanish just fell to the side. Or that's something that quite often happens, and it's normal. It's not easy when you're doing a full-time job, and then if you only see your kids a few hours in the evening, if even that. So I can understand that happens, especially if you don't kind of think about it too much. It's very easy to just fall into the routine of speaking the majority language. So the majority language is English, and the husband speaks English with the son. They now have so the eldest one is now 4, the younger one is 2. And now the roles will be reversed. So Beatrice will stay at home with the boys. So she would like to pick up Spanish again with them. As she writes, with a 2-year-old, that shouldn't be too difficult, because he will just accept whatever she speaks, and he has heard him speak Spanish. Her concern is with her 4-year-old, and this is what Beatrice writes. He is obviously completely comfortable in English and goes to an English preschool. So his strong language is English. My question is how to approach teaching him Spanish again at his age. It was all he heard from her the first 2 years, but it's now feels like starting with a new language. He still heard it occasionally, and also from his grandmother. But according to Beatrice, he shows absolutely no interest in learning. He basically either doesn't acknowledge that anyone is talking to him if it's in Spanish, or he will just look confused until they say it in English. And Beatrice continues, he's too young to understand the concept of another language when I try to explain it to him. He thinks he just can't understand the speaker for whatever reason. He's at that in-between point where I can't just immerse him like the 2-year-old brother, but I can't discuss the concept of another language the way you would with an older child. So how should she approach teaching the oldest son, the 4-year-old son, Spanish, and how can she start again? She would like him to be fluently bilingual like she is. And it can't be 100% immersion anyway, since her husband only speaks English, and son's calling this in English. So it's true that a 4-year-old doesn't necessarily understand the concept of different languages by saying that this is Spanish and this is English. But you can identify, what I would recommend that you do is to identify a language with a person. So for example, with a grandma, so this is how grandma says, then this is how daddy says it, and this is how grandma says it, or this is how mommy says it, if you want to identify the language with yourself. I think he will understand the concept, and I think you might be over-interpreting his reaction a bit. It's not that he is consciously ignoring or refusing to understand. It's just that children are very pragmatic, and they will do what comes easiest to them. So he has got along fine with English in the family, and he's used to people understanding when he speaks English. So that's his comfort zone, and that's where children like to stay. So for you to make him interested in learning things in Spanish, you'll find you need to find a way that is enticing for him. Maybe you could do that, for example, through bilingual books. So you have a book that is both in English and in Spanish, and you point out that this is how daddy says it, and this is how grandma says it. So he starts to accept that there are more than one ways to say something. You can also explain that it is important that his little brother understands Spanish, because that's what grandma speaks, and that you will be teaching him his younger brother Spanish. And then children are quite often eager to help, so you can ask him for help and ask him, can he be part of it, and can he also sometimes maybe if you, let's say, you can start singing some songs, so your elder son also could participate. If he kind of had the language for 2 years, for his 2 first years, it will still be there in his brain. It hasn't completely disappeared. It will just take some time to get it to come to the surface again. You can also bring in, like my favorite ideas about monolingual toys. You can bring in some toys that only speak Spanish. Hand puppets are great for that. Anything that interests your son. So I think it's just a question of getting above this initial hurdle of believing that he will want to learn Spanish, and that he accepts Spanish as a family language. Think positively. I would recommend that you remove the thought from your mind that he is completely against it, or he ignores it, or he pretends not to understand. He's just waiting. Look at it that he's just waiting for the opportunity to want to learn Spanish, and that he finds it interesting. But you being home all the time now, you will have plenty of opportunities to introduce Spanish in different ways, and I'm sure you will succeed. Just believe in it, and continue speaking Spanish, and don't have patience. Don't be frustrated with him if he answers in English. If he says something in English, it's going, yes, that's how daddy says it, and this is how we say it in Spanish. So I'm sure you can do it now when you have enough time to spend with your son. So good luck, Beatrice. The next question is from Sihi. She's got a 50-month-old girl, and she has been speaking Korean. Dad is speaking Bulgarian, and they have now moved to Bulgaria. So while they were in the US, Mom spoke Korean and Dad spoke Bulgarian and English. And she was in their daughter was in English daycare since she was 9 months old. So now when they moved to Bulgaria, Mom switched to English so that the little daughter wouldn't forget that language, because obviously Bulgarian will now be the strongest language. Dad speaks Bulgarian, and other relatives and the surrounding community is all in Bulgarian. However, now the question is, what about Korean? Because there is, as it is now, there is no Korean exposure, and he writes that it's important because she wants her daughter to be able to communicate with her grandparents and know that this is her heritage language. I understand that, and it is important, and the fact is, if you want your daughter to learn Korean, then it has to come from you. As I understand it, there is no other chances. There are no other chances of Korean exposure for your daughter in Bulgaria as it is. When English is one of a family's minority language, it's always so much easier to find different exposures. Maybe like play groups, or online. There's also, when a child grows a bit older and there's more screen time, there's online. There's a lot of available high quality programs that you can follow, and all of these things. So it's so much easier to find exposure to English. Now, so he is asking about using the time and place strategy, so she would speak both English and Korean. And yes, that is definitely a possibility. What you could do is to choose, for example, a day in the week or a weekend. You do not mention, say, whether you are a stay-at-home mom now, so that is that's an important aspect of the whole situation, because if you are a stay-at-home mom, so you can immerse her in Korean like during the week all day long, then what you could do is to dedicate the weekends to the English, for example. However, if you're working and you only have a few hours each day to speak Korean to her, then you have to consider it very carefully how to fit the English in, because in that case I wouldn't recommend doing English during the weekends, because the Korean exposure would probably not be enough for your daughter to learn to become fluent in it. So if, as you write, that Korean is important to you, then that is the language you need to concentrate on now. It will be so much more difficult if you leave it for now and try to pick it up later on. English will be a lot easier to do later on, or as I said, if you do have if you stay at home with her during the week, then you could choose to do time and place and in English, with English in the weekends, and you could all speak English then. Even your husband, you mentioned that your husband speaks English but with an accent. Well, that's fine. As far as I understand it, you are fully fluent in English, and English is actually a stronger language. She will pick up the accent and the vocabulary from you, so that's fine. So that was his question, and next is Anna's question. She's got a little baby girl who will by now be about 6 months old, and Anna, mom, speaks Spanish and English, and dad speaks Spanish and English. So they lived They lived in the US, but they have now moved to Denmark. And Anna writes, I want my daughter to be trilingual, and we make sure she listens to all 3 languages every day. Naturally, I speak English and Spanish to her. I try to be about 50-50. And my husband speaks Danish and English to her, more Danish than English. I have read all about the one parent, one language strategy, but I want to raise her speaking. Speaking both to her. So Anna wants to speak both English and Spanish to her daughter. She herself became bilingual when, as her dad, Anna's dad, spoke to her both English and Spanish, and she doesn't recall any problems, and she grew up to become bilingual in both languages. And I also comments that this nowadays this seems like it's a big no-no, and that you would need to have a strict one parent, one language strategy. Well, yes, there are those who say consistency is the only right way to go, and using 2 languages is a no-no. I don't believe in that. There are many families where both parents speak both languages. If you look on my website, if you look up with the keyword 2P2L, which is 2 parents, 2 languages, it's a strategy that works, and which is Annick de Hoover has done research into it, and it's turned out to be as effective as the one parent, one language strategy. However, what one needs to take into consideration that when this works is when there is an equal amount of exposure to both languages, and usually you also get the exposure in the surrounding community. So just Anna, because it worked for you with your dad, you can't take it as a given that you can use the same approach as your dad, because the other circumstances are different. Most of all, you have one additional language in the family, and also you won't have any Spanish in the community in Denmark where you are. So your situation is definitely different. I'm not saying that you shouldn't speak both languages. Yes, you can. But what you need to be most aware of is that it's the amount of exposure that's important, and Spanish will be the language that you need to concentrate on, because that's the language your daughter will get least exposure to. Also, if you do not mention what language you and your husband speak together, but my presumption is that it's English. So English will always have a place in your home, and your husband will also speak English, and also you will speak English sometimes with your daughter. So what will happen is that the amount of time you speak Spanish with your daughter will be very little. So again, English being one of your family's minority languages, as you live in Denmark, there are a lot of opportunities in Denmark. You will even find playgroups and schools that you could put her in later on if you want. It will not be as easy to find a Spanish exposure for her. So my recommendation would be that you concentrate on the Spanish. Please feel free to use English now and then, or songs or games or rhymes if you want to. You don't have to be 100% consistent. However, the more you speak English, the more likely your daughter will be to answer in English to you. So if you want to be sure that she picks up Spanish and answers you in Spanish, then my recommendation would be that you speak as much Spanish as possible with her. So you can make your choice based on that. just be aware that if there's very little Spanish exposure, then the likelihood is that she will maybe learn to understand it, but not use it. If she will most likely prefer English because that's the language she hears more. So that was Anna's question, and then I have Anna's question. Anna, when she lives in the German part of Switzerland, and she's got a daughter who will now be close to a year old, and Anna speaks 4 languages herself, and but she's chosen to speak English with her daughter since she was born. English is a non-native language to her. This is not an unusual setup, and if you're interested in reading articles about that, then go to the website multilingualparenting.com and type in the search word non-native language. So English is not Anna's mother tongue, and she hasn't lived in an English-speaking country. She also takes her daughter to an English-speaking playgroup once a week. Her father, her husband, so her daughter's father, speaks Albanian. I assume Daddy is working because she says that there's limited exposure to Albanian. That's fine. So Albanian from mom, Albanian from dad, English from mom, and then German from the environment. I presume this is Schweizerdeutsch then that she's learning. And Anna's question is, what are the consequences of talking to my daughter in English despite it not being my mother tongue? She will learn the English from you. I haven't heard you speak. I mean, the little that you write is it's really good English. So, but any accent that you have, she will pick up. Is that a big deal? She's learning a language. She's getting a great gift, and you might not even have a strong accent, but whatever because you will be her main exposure to English, so she will pick up whatever the way you speak, unless you get more exposure from native speakers. I don't know about the playgroup, whether that's other non-native English speaker in the playgroup, but I wouldn't put that much emphasis on that. She will learn German as soon as she goes to nursery or wherever. And you mentioned that you ask if we send her to English courses for native children living abroad, is there a chance that she acquires the language the same level as a native? You mentioned courses, so that to me indicates like a few weeks, maybe a couple of times a year or something. That would not be enough for her to reach a native level as such. However, there are many other ways for her to improve her English. So through once she grows up a bit and can watch quality TV programs, by reading a lot, and by establishing her own relationships with native English speakers. So yes, she can learn, become a fluent English speaker. I wouldn't worry too much about the native language. She will have an excellent knowledge of English. So I don't really see the need for her fluency to be native-like. It's fantastic that she grows up learning Albanian from her dad, English from you, and then German from school or the environment. So you ask how realistic your expectations are. So the native like, because I don't know the level of your English, that's why I can't give you an answer to that. But she will learn whatever you can speak to her. If you want her to be really native like, then she would need to speak or spend a significant amount of time with native English speakers. But as I said, she will learn English to a high standard anyway. So the native-like fluency is you need to think about it, how important that is to you. And then you also mentioned that people keep questioning our choice. Therefore, I get a bit uncertain sometimes, and that's why she's asking for your advice. Yes, I'm sorry about that. I know people always question one's choices as a parent, and that doesn't only concern language. It's about any decision that you do as a parent, and there are those who will question it. Breastfeed or not breastfeed, when to start with solid food, and when does the baby go to sleep, or how long they stay outside during the day, and there are so many different things, and people have different opinions. The same goes for languages. Do what you feel is right, and you need to make the decisions about what you want for your daughter, and you're giving your daughter a fantastic starting life with languages by giving her English and Albanian and German. So do what you feel is right. There always will be those who will question our decisions, but in your heart you know what is best for you and your daughter and your family. Good luck with it. And the last question tonight is from Federica. She's got a 4-year-old daughter, and she's always speaking Italian. She's always spoken Italian to her. Her husband is Spanish, and he speaks Spanish to their daughter, although he's bilingual, as he was born and raised in the UK. They now live in Dubai, and their daughter's nanny and school are in English. And Federica's challenge is that the 4-year-old daughter always replies in English. And she understands perfectly Italian and Spanish, but has never ever talked to either her or her husband in any other language than English. And Federica writes that, I'm losing hope, especially now that the brother is 2, and they have started to speak to each other in English. We both work long hours, but evenings, holidays and weekends I thought would have been sufficient. What am I doing wrong? Oh, dear Federica, you are not doing anything wrong. You are doing as best as you can. It's not easy when you're working long hours, and you've done well by keeping up the Italian and the Spanish. Like I mentioned before, it's children are pragmatic, and you do not mention which language you and your husband speak together. If English is your common language, then if you were to understand each other's languages, or either of them, so if your husband understands your language Italian and you understand your husband's language Spanish, then consider whether you could start using those languages when you speak with each other. that would mean that you would exclude English from the home as a home language, because now your children, if you speak English with each other, then your children are used to that being the family language, and they are used to answering in English. And since they have less exposure to Italian and Spanish, and they might not, and especially also the 4-year-old might not feel confident in using either of them, then a child will do what is easiest and what they will communicate in the way a child can, and that is English, because that's she probably gets most exposure to English at the moment. So it's natural, and it will take patience. Other things what you could consider is that whether you could find a nanny or nannies that speak either Spanish or Italian. Maybe you could have different nannies. I don't know if these suggestions are in any way possible, but that's another way. Maybe you could lessen the English exposure. Also, if you can make sure that whenever there is TV on, if you can get Spanish or Italian through that way. So just try to find different ways of lessening the English influence in the home. I know many in many families where there is lesser exposure to the minority languages, where children haven't answered their parents by the age of 4 or even 5. I just did a couple of weeks ago, I spoke to a father, English-speaking father living in Sweden, who would always spoken English to his son, but he had never answered him in English. And then it happened when the son was 5 years old, and that happened after a discussion when the father asked his son that, I know you understand English, I know you know English, why don't you answer me in English? And the son said that, oh, I don't know it so well, maybe you love me. So these are things to take into consideration, and even ask, depending on the level of communication that you can have with a child. Ask why don't you want to answer, and if they say, well, it's difficult or I feel shy, and then try to work around those situations. But most importantly, believe in your child. It will happen. Just have patience, and don't think that you're doing anything wrong. We always, as parents, we make the best decisions at any point in time. We make the best decisions based on the information we have and the resources and the time we have that we can use. There are no wrong decisions in that way. You never make a wrong decision, have the intention of making a wrong decision. You always pardon me, you always try to do what's best for your child and for your family. In hindsight, you might sometimes think, well, it would have been better to do this or that, but then at that point you didn't have that information, or you didn't have that time. So don't think that you're doing something wrong. Just believe that it will happen, and you're doing a great thing, and you always say that since you write that your daughter understands perfectly, that's a lot. That's a great situation to be in, because you know that she has picked it up. It's now a question of getting her across that threshold of saying something. So making that enticing and maybe even with some small rewards, even if for this, and always praising the minutest of attempt to use either Italian or Spanish. Believe in yourself, in your abilities, you're not doing anything wrong, and believe in your children. They will be able to speak to you, but you need to have the patience and the trust that it will happen, and just continue what you do. Thank you very much. Those were the questions for tonight. And if anyone I will do more Q&As about once a week, or at least a couple of times a month. Keep them coming in, and I wish everyone really good luck with passing on their family languages. Thank you very much, and have a good night.